Welcome back. You are listening to Ivy Unleashed here with Brooke and Andrea. For all those here today, we are so grateful for you.
Yes, we are. And we are so excited because as health coaches, we are obsessed with building effective habits because it's the key to positive behavior change.
Yeah. And right now I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's so good. And I cannot wait to dive even more into this topic today.
Yes, and our guest today is a national board certified health and wellness coach and has worked within the corporate wellness field for 6 years. She studied clinical exercise science at Grand Valley State University and recently started her very own private health coaching company, The Habit of Health.
Monica Thibodeau works with people just like you, one-on-one, to effectively use your habits to take your health to the next level with minimal effort. From following her, I have observed that Monica is a helper, a hiker, dog lover, sunset watcher, and the self-proclaimed habit queen.
Yes.
So Monica, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you guys so much. I cannot wait to dive into all things habits with you.
Yes, and you are all about habits. It's everywhere, all over your social, and we are loving it so much. So what got you into learning about habits?
It's a good question, and I get it quite often, actually. And it goes back to, it wasn't all that long ago when I was just at a point in my life where it wasn't that I wasn't happy. I just knew that there was so much more I could be doing. I knew that I was settling. I knew that there were opportunities that I wasn't taking advantage of, and I really just wanted to reassess things and get really clear about what I wanted, what I needed, and then how to communicate those things. And at the time I was working with a therapist, which I highly recommend for just about anyone, but that helped me get really clear on what this vision I have for my own life is and looks like. And throughout that process, it led to me putting my own habits, routines, systems in my life under a microscope, and I didn't really love what I was seeing. So, all that to say that I think that habits are just huge in our life, and I believe that they are the key to effortless, sustained success. And most people would say that's not true. Most people think that the most successful people are the ones with the most motivation, but I think they're the ones with the best habits.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about outsmarting motivation and why habits are better and more sustainable and really the key. So I'm curious, can you speak to why you believe habits are the key to outsmarting motivation?
Mm-hmm. I have such a bone to pick with motivation. I think that we as a culture, and I hear this all the time when I'm working with people one-on-one, we give motivation way too much power. And because of this, it has led to me forming 3 unpopular beliefs I have about motivation in general. And the very first is that motivation doesn't matter. And that's not to say it doesn't exist. It's a thing, it's real, but we give it so much power and it's unreliable, right? So to answer your question, habits are the key to outsmarting motivation, because when you're relying on this magical feeling of motivation to wash over you and change your life, it's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So instead, if you shift your focus to habits, you are relying on an automatic response to a specific situation. That's what a habit is. And that situation is something you can design and implement in your own life. And that puts the power in your hands instead of in the hands of motivation. It's empowering versus limiting.
Oh, I love that. Well, it makes you kind of think about, what do I do? What do I have as a habit? How did I get there? And what am I doing without thinking about it? Because I've created this situation. Like, I have a big red flag that goes up if I walk in my room and my bed isn't made. I hate it because it is a habit. I don't have to be inspired to make my bed anymore. I've always just made my bed. But when you have a partner.
Right. But how did you know that setting yourself up for success looked like building this habit of making your bed. Same for you, Monica, with, wanting to change these behaviors and start. How did you get started with habits? How did you funnel down from the behavior that you want to figuring out what habits you needed to make automatic responses to help you get there?
Mm-hmm. This is when you peel back the layers. And as health coaches, we know that is essentially the basic foundation of what we do. We keep asking people why, okay, why? And sometimes people can get irritated with that, but we tell ourselves such damaging stories throughout our lives. Like, I'm not a morning person, or I'm messy, so I don't make my bed. And these beliefs form our habits. What comes out of our mouth comes into our life. And so many times I hear from people, I don't feel motivated. And because they don't feel that way, they think that something's wrong with them. They see other people doing things that they think require motivation. And when they can't figure out how to do those things, they think, oh crap, it's because I don't have motivation. Something's wrong with me. Just missed the boat on that one. And that's kind of how I felt. Brooke, I've heard you talk about this on several other episodes, that you are really trying to form a good morning routine, get out of bed early in the morning, and it sets you up for success. And when I was going through that phase in my life where I was just kind of feeling mopey and just not myself, that's what I came to realize, is that my morning routine, getting up and doing something for me, was absolutely essential. It needed to happen. And I wanted to become that type of person. And in order to figure out, okay, now these are the actual behaviors that I want to be doing, I had to start identifying with the person who does those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in Atomic Habits, he talks a lot about the identity of who you want to become. So exactly like what you're saying. Okay, so what type of person do I want to become? And what are these habits that this person who does this, right, who's a morning person, what do they do? Mm-hmm. And to start there, which you talk a lot about on social too, Monica, about self-identity. And then that's really kind of your starting point of asking yourself, who do I want to become? Who is that ideal version of me? What does that look like? And then funneling down the why.
Mm-hmm. So when I'm working with someone one-on-one and they list off all these really wonderful things that they want to start doing, we have to start with their beliefs. And in order to really speak to this and, speak about how beliefs are the key to overcoming somebody's barriers, I have to go on just a bit of a health coaching tangent. And I know I'm going to be preaching to you guys because you're there with me. But so many times people think that when we think of a coach, we think, okay, coach is telling, we're doing. And as a health coach, I am never going to sit back and be like, all right, I've done this. You should do it too. Even though when it comes to habits, I've tried just about everything. As a masterful coach, I know that it is so much more beneficial to have somebody sit and simmer in their own thoughts and go through those mindset shifts on their own. And just because I'm not telling you what to do doesn't mean I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know just because we have worked with many people in similar predicaments, right? So when you have this type of conversation with someone, it allows you to stand alongside them and figure out, okay, what is holding you back? And oftentimes it's not a physical thing. It is a deep-rooted limiting belief. Mm-hmm. And that's why beliefs are a foundational first pillar of my health coaching practice. It is the very first thing we talk about, and we don't go anywhere until we've addressed your beliefs. And sometimes, it takes the client maybe a session to dig into this. Other times it's really all we talk about. But as they've laid that foundation, these habits that they want to start doing just happen naturally.
I think it's so important that whoever is listening right now to think about What do you believe about yourself that doesn't feel good, that feels heavy, that feels negative, that feels like maybe it came from someone else that you want to just get rid of? You know, it might be the morning person thing. It might be that you're a heavy person. It might be that you have never been able to do this thing that you admire and it's always been on your heart. You know, you can let go of any belief. You can explore where it came from and you can kick it to the curb. And I think sometimes when people have goals around fitness or what they would like their physique to change into, they don't see themselves as that muscular person. They've never been that. They don't think that they can become that. And I think what you're saying, you know, to go along with that is so important, to let go of some of those beliefs, to explore where they came from, and to maybe start with just some habits of what that could look like that could start building. And if you have to emulate someone, maybe that's what you do.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, what I love so much about this is that in this discussion about who you want to be and this vision that you're creating for yourself, you see people start to detach from the outcomes. So an outcome may be, I want to be this weight, or an outcome may be, I want to run this race. Those are things and they're great, right? And as a coach, I can help somebody create some small steps to get them to that place. But what I know to be way more compelling is to attach to the journey of becoming the type of person that does these things. So shift your focus to the type of person you want to be instead of the things that you want to do. So Brooke, just like you were saying, forming a new identity around this. In Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about how your identity needs to be able to adapt continuously. It needs to be able to change. You can't get attached to it, or else you won't be setting yourself up for growth.
Yeah. And I also think it's this idea of, you know, you hear the quote in self-development all the time. It's about the journey and not the destination. Going into confidence. In our episode of confidence, we talked about your identity being like a thermostat. And if you're doing all of these, you know, things like trying to run a race, trying to lose 5 pounds to get to this person that you want to be, but your self-identity, this image is set at a certain level because of these limiting beliefs that you have, you're never going to overcome that. So if you try and become the type of person, it's all about the journey. It's not about, okay, I'll be happy when I get there because I'm happy now because I'm doing these things that the person that I want to be is doing. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah. So you don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. You are a morning person. What would a morning person do?
Wake up at 5
And if you just keep asking, exactly. And if you just keep asking yourself that, then your actions start to align with it. Your brain is always going to do its best to not contradict itself. So if you're putting out there, I'm not a runner, I'm not a morning person, your butt's not going to get out of bed at 5 a.m. If you start to tell yourself things, even if you don't believe them to be 100% true yet, chances are you're going to get there.
Well, that's why affirmations are so powerful. Our brain needs to be told what to do and where to go. Like ultimately, we have the control. We have to tell it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think when you're starting to shift your beliefs, it's uncomfortable, you know, and I would love to hear how you talk through people about building those habits when it feels unnatural. Like, this is something I definitely want to do, but it feels so uncomfortable. It feels so unnatural. You know, how do you talk someone through kind of creating those habits?
I think the first thing to just really call out here is that when something feels uncomfortable and unnatural to you, it is you unlearning years and years and years of this past identity or this past behavior. And because of that, you got to get good at showing yourself some grace and letting go of that all or nothing mindset. This is something that holds so many people back. And I'm just laughing and smiling right now because I know when my boyfriend hears this, he's going to be like, oh, you just had to throw that in there, didn't you? Because he has such this mindset of all or nothing. And I'm always like, come on, just do a little baby step first. And there is something so powerful about just getting some momentum going. And that's my second unpopular opinion about motivation, is that you don't need more of it. You just need some momentum. Mm-hmm. Get out of the analysis paralysis phase and just do something. And there's three main tactics that I often find myself recommending to people. The first, in true Monica language, is just freaking start. Like, just start. Count down from 3, get your butt out of bed, and just move. Go do something. The other rule I love is creating some sort of maybe 5-minute rule, or maybe it's 2 minutes for you, but tell yourself you're going to do that thing for 5 minutes and then stop. You give yourself permission to stop. So if this is a workout, if it's going out and walking, go for 5 minutes. Chances are you're going to look down at your watch at 4 minutes and 49 seconds and be like, okay, this isn't so bad. I can keep going. And we keep referencing Atomic Habits, but in his 5-minute rule, he says you must stop after 5 minutes. And I think that could be something really powerful to experiment with as well. The other two are from BJ Fogg's book, Tiny Habits, which is incredible. And I think he calls them something a little bit different, but they are either shrinking a behavior down or scaling a behavior back. So to shrink something down, you would be making it tiny. If your goal is to run a marathon, commit to running for 2 minutes a day. Scale it back is just doing the first step. So what's the first thing you need to do in order to go on a run? Probably change your clothes and put your shoes on. So just commit to doing that. And these things are great for getting you started, but it's also important to mention that this is a strategy for that momentum, get you out of your stuck phase. But if you want to run a marathon, eventually you're going to have to run more than 2 minutes at a time, right?
Right.
Andrea, I know you know this. I know you know. So this is where it's a perfect opportunity to invest in the help of, maybe one of your close friends that is going to be able to deliver you that tough love, or a coach that can hold you accountable and keep challenging you to do more so that you get to that end goal, whatever it may be, whatever that vision is that you've created for yourself.
I love all of that. Thank you for that, because I think scaling it back is I don't know, what gives me like a good visual of thinking about just something so little, like that's like micro, like a little micro step. And you, as a habit expert, I just want to hear if you have any like personal stories about how you've had to do this, something like really uncomfortable for yourself, creating a habit that's felt kind of unnatural for you.
So something that, felt super uncomfortable for me, and I've mentioned this already, but it was that creating a morning routine for myself. I was waking up at 7:45 in the morning. I worked 45 minutes away. I had to be there at 8 a.m. And, I have a dog to take care of. I do not wake up like this. Like, I had stuff I needed to do before I got my butt out the door for work. And I just noticed that when I was starting my day in that really hectic rush, trying to find my keys, trying to find my shoes, what am I bringing for lunch? It put me in the worst mood possible. All day long, I was crabby because I was doing stuff for other people and I hadn't given myself any time. And what I slowly started doing was setting all my stuff out the night before. And this goes back to the concept of discipline. When we want to be disciplined in something, we need to be creating an environment in which it's easy to be disciplined. When we have, junk food in the house, but we're trying to eat healthy, those two things really butt heads. And so what I discovered after trying shrinking it down, after trying scaling it back and all these other strategies, was that what worked best for me when it comes to that morning routine is literally setting up my apartment. I mean, if you saw my apartment before I go to bed, you would think a sociopath lived there. The salt and pepper I put on my eggs in the morning is out on the counter. Everything I could possibly need. Everything.
That's a great idea, actually. Wow, that's really scaling it back and making it easy for yourself.
I've started doing the same thing too, because I notice exactly like you said, at 5 a.m., I'm cold, I'm exhausted, and I know that there's these things in my morning that help me and make me feel better, but I have to start with the path of least resistance. So what is the easiest? Okay, step 1, rise. Step 2, turn on the light. Step 3, turn off the alarm clock. Step 4, and then also these things of journaling, meditating, working out. Okay, which one is going to take the least effort? Okay, meditating. Let's start there. Or getting water, then meditating, and then slowly easing my way into working out. But I also think it's important to know what you said about finding what works best for you. Is that that's so important, right? We're giving out all these tips or saying this worked for me, but you also noted that you tried so many things until you found something that works for you. So take what we're saying, but it's going to take some time to figure out what works for you, because ultimately when you find what works for you, it's going to stick.
Yep.
I always tell people that I'm working with that approach this as an experiment. You're not committing to doing this for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to feel scary. You're just testing it out for a week or 2. And then you can come back and tell me about what went well, what didn't work for you, and we can move on from there.
Yeah. And I've developed to approaching it with curiosity. And when I approach it from that lens of being curious, I allow myself more grace. It gives me more grace, because I'm like, you know what? I was just curious. It was an experiment. It didn't work out. All right, well, this isn't for me. Doesn't mean that I'm not a morning person. Doesn't mean that I'm not disciplined or any less than. It just means that, nope, this didn't work for me, and on to the next tactic.
Yeah. And like Monica said too about the identity thing, is that your identity is always changing and evolving. And so you might have something figured out for you that works in this moment or this season of your life, and then it might change. So just knowing that this is an ever evolving process and you are an ever evolving person kind of takes the pressure off of having to always have this perfect habit or the right thing to do,
And I think the other thing to call out is that if you are willing to embark on this journey, you also have to be willing to be very mindful and aware of the impact these new habits have or don't have on you. And if I were to just have moved through my day after like working out in the morning and not really paid attention to my energy level, my mood, how I felt at the end of the day, I probably wouldn't have connected the two together as quickly. But if you are able to decide on, what are those key indicators for you that something has made a difference in your day, then you can use those as a way to measure, okay, is this working for me, or do I need to try something else? Do I need to do a new experiment?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it connects you to your why. When we talked earlier about funneling down to that why, for mornings, it's I want to take care of me and I want to fill up my cup first. And it makes me feel more relaxed throughout my day, more focused. And so when I don't wake up early, I'm like, oh, shoot, I miss that feeling. And I'm getting so clear on my why. And it took me to explore and experiment to get clear on how do I want to feel. And that in return has given me motivation. I think motivation is getting really, really clear and being mindful and aware of your why. So Monica, I'm curious, you talk about the difference between power and motivation and discipline. And what do you feel is the most important to focus on for behavior change?
I think that these things are all important and we need them, but how we strengthen them and how we develop better discipline or get more motivation, it's all rooted in addressing our habits. So by addressing your habits, you're doing some work here. I think it's kind of helpful also to define these things, especially motivation, because again, people make it seem like it is this coveted thing on a pedestal. And really all it is that it's a desire to do something. I desire to move to Colorado, purchase 40 acres of land and have 12 dogs, but my actions aren't really getting me there. Like you can desire to do just about anything, but that doesn't mean that that alone is going to get you to do that thing. So when people say like, oh, I just can't find the motivation, I just want to be like, stop looking, like, stop looking. You have this within yourself. And again, by peeling back those layers, we can get to the foundation of it. When it comes to willpower and discipline, these two things go hand in hand. A lot of times I find that people, much like motivation, they think it's so simple, but it really isn't. You know, we wake up in the morning, and I like to think of willpower and discipline as just like our muscles in our body. In the morning, our willpower and discipline muscles, they're fresh, they're ready. So the things you want to be doing, especially those new unnatural, uncomfortable habits, they should be done when your willpower and discipline muscles are fresh and ready to go after it. They should be done in the morning, which is why we keep coming back to that morning routine. It's so important. And when it comes to strengthening those discipline muscles, we got to think of our environment. You've got to be setting yourself up for success. It's just like, you know, if you want to remain in a faithful, committed relationship, don't you dare go out to the bars every single night while you're surrounded by honeys and temptation. I mean, put yourself in the correct environment to be successful.
That is such a great point. That's a great visual too, to think about it. And I never really thought about that, being so fresh in the morning, and that's part of the reason why it's easier.
Why is that? Like, what is the science behind? Is it because throughout the day we make so many decisions that we kind of have like this decision debt, or we're just tired and exhausted that it's fresher in the morning, or what really is that?
Mm-hmm. I think you're dead on. You know, when we go through our day, and I remember there was a time when I was working in an office way long ago, and I would walk past the conference room, and there were always bagels on the table. There were always treats and bowls of candy all around. And you say no to those things. Not that any of those things are bad, but I know that those are some of the foods that didn't make me feel best, and to eat them on a consistent basis would not be what's right for me and my body. And so all day long, I'd be walking past those things. I would be using my discipline, saying no, eating my lunch that I packed. And when I got home, I felt like I needed to reward myself for this. And I would have handfuls of chocolate chips. And, you know, by the end of the day, your discipline is fatigued. You've used it all day long. So why wait until you know you're going to be just worn out to do something new and uncomfortable that is absolutely going to require some amount of discipline and some amount of willpower?
Yeah, it's the same idea of working out. In the morning, your discipline is, you know, higher, fresher, where I find it easier to work out versus after a long day of work. You get home and the last thing you want to do is work out. You just want to sit on the couch. When I sit on the couch, I'm like, it's game over. If I get home, I immediately need to put on workout clothes and keep going. But in the morning, I have so much more, I wouldn't even call it discipline, but just like, this is just how it is. More energy.
I'm different than that when it comes to exercise. Like when you said just freaking start or just freaking do it is how I feel with exercise in the morning. Typically, I would use it as like an aftermath. Like, I need to go for a run because I'm stressed. And so I would normally fit it in at like afternoon or evening or whatever. But I think, you know, everyone has to figure out what works for them or their schedule. You know, it might not work out with some families. Some kids get up way too early and parents just don't have a choice.
Right. Like you have to, but you also then do it blacked out in the morning. Whereas I kind of have it be like my fifth thing that I do in the morning. So I am awake. I am alive. I'm not blacked out, but that's what works for me. Mm-hmm. I don't have kids yet. That is my time. I have the luxury of easing into it where you're like, if I get this done, if I want to get it done, I got to get it done right away.
Yeah. And thinking of you, Monica, I know from following you that you're a big traveler. You like to go a lot of different places. I'm sure COVID has affected that, but just thinking about that, because when we get to travel again and thinking about habits and kind of how those go hand in hand, you know, how do you balance all the places you'd like to go and the habits you have back home and that whole process?
Mm-hmm. And going back to your environment, it's tough. I also think that the pandemic has really shed light to how big of an impact our environment has on our behaviors. For so many people, their drive to work and being in that office environment like triggered a bunch of different behaviors for them, or a lot of people linked their workouts to pre or post work day. And when you're traveling, you're obviously in much different environments. And this is a time where it's helpful for not only myself, but I think for people that I'm working with or anyone listening, to come up with your bare minimum foundational behaviors. What are the things that you know, number one, you need to be doing consistently to keep yourself feeling your best, whether that be physically, mentally, it could be either of those things, but also they're at a level that you could do them on your hardest day. So think of a day where it's just straight chaos. You're in a bad mood. You got so many things to do. There's just no time. These are the things that you're still going to be able to do on that type of day. And therefore you'd be able to do when you're traveling or when a pandemic hits. For me personally, that is getting enough water and moving my body in some way. I know that those two things are going to be enough so that I feel good physically, but also feel good mentally of like, okay, I'm still taking care of myself. Also, I would add that eating a vegetable at some point throughout the day is important for me. But, sometimes when you're traveling, those things are hard to do. And you're not going to have access to maybe your typical gym or even space to work out. But can you stretch for 5 minutes? Probably.
I love that. It's finding your 3 daily non-negotiables. And okay, if I'm in a different environment, how can I, or we said earlier, how can you scale it back so that you can get some sort of movement in? How can I find water or make sure that I have water with me if I'm going to be in a different environment? I think, a quote that I have that I live by is fail to plan, plan to fail. And it's something that I'm working on. I'm building up all these habits and I'm in a social situation and I'm up later than normal and I'm learning to give myself grace, but it's still like, okay, shoot, I wish I would have did this. If only I would have did this, then I would have felt better today. But if I have these 3 daily non-negotiables, I can be like, okay, well, did I at least do those yesterday? Yep, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard though. That's a hard balance when you love your habits and they make you feel that way. It is hard to not kick yourself if you don't get to them or if they don't look the way they normally do.
And I think that I'm glad you guys went there with this, because when you have those bare minimums, the non-negotiables, most days you're probably doing well over that bare minimum. And that should feel really freaking good. And we change when we feel good, not when we feel bad. So that's why we've talked about showing yourself some grace. If you get down on yourself just after one day of missing, whatever habit it may be, you might set yourself back. If you allow yourself to get into a negative headspace after missing out on just maybe one habit one day, then that's when you start to slip back into those limiting beliefs. That's when they start creeping back in. And by establishing that groundwork, bare minimum, non-negotiable, you are being realistic and you're setting yourself up for success time and time again, because it's something you can do. You've done that prep work. You've thought about your life and the barriers that you may encounter, and you can do the things that are important for you to be doing to feel like your best self.
Yeah. And if you miss it, give yourself grace by reminding yourself that you're human, saying, okay, what didn't happen? Why didn't it happen? And moving forward, what can I do differently to make sure it doesn't happen again? Because you're bringing it into awareness, you're acknowledging it, and then you're moving on because you're human.
And tomorrow's a new day. You can always have another fresh start.
So for someone unhappy in their current situation, wants to make a change, is struggling to just start, how do you recommend that they go about starting?
Going back to showing ourselves grace and making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success and feeling good throughout this process, it may be helpful to just call out the different components of what an actual habit loop is and looks like. So at the very beginning of any behavior is something that reminds us to do that behavior. You may have heard this referred to as a prompt, a cue. We touched on your environment earlier. The reason that's so powerful is because your environment is made up of visual cues, and those are actually the most compelling. So the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. So we have the prompt. Then we have the actual behavior, whatever it is you're actually doing. And then you have the reward. And this one gets a little interesting because many times, especially with our health, the reward that we're after is pretty delayed. You want to lose weight, it's not going to happen immediately. I wish it would, right? I wish I could eat a salad and be like, looking my best, but that's not the way it works. So in the moment, we have to be doing something that makes us feel good and that wires whatever that behavior is into our brain so that it becomes a habit. And this is something that's so fun to talk about with clients. You have to celebrate. You have to tell yourself that you are the shit because you got out of bed at 5 a.m. You got to be doing something that makes you feel good. And I will give a very shameless plug for my cousin. She is my hype girl. I can text her about the smallest little thing that I've done, and it's like rapid fire. You're amazing. You're a badass. Keep going. You got this. And that is positive reinforcement. That is telling my brain like, oh, I feel good when I do this thing. And eventually I'm going to be able to do that thing without texting her. But there's also going to be times where like, I need that motivation to even get me going. So it's a delicate balance, and that celebration can be anything. It's nice to have an accountability partner. You can do this for yourself. You can say out loud or just in your mind how amazing you are. You can just smile. I have a client that dances, like actually does a little dance. You can talk to your pet, whatever is going to work for you. And you're probably going to feel goofy, but that's part of it. Because when you're feeling goofy, you're smiling and you're laughing. So why not?
Yeah, and our brain wants us to feel good. Mm-hmm. It's trying to protect us. It's trying to be like, you know what? Yep, I like this feeling. Give me more of this feeling. And it all starts with that cue of, okay, I wake up, first thing I see are my workout clothes. And as we start reinforcing this habit, building this habit, it becomes an automatic response of, okay, yep, so I see my clothes. I know that means I put them on and I go for a run. And then I get this feeling good behavior after it.
And you pop in the mirror and you do a little dance.
Yep. And it's just this feedback of, yep, this is going, this is happening. And then we don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I like that dance idea too. I'm going to do that when when I just meet a goal, I'm just going to do a little.
Just a little dig.
All right. I'm going to see you dance and I'm going to be like, all right, what habit did you just form?
Love that.
Monica, I just have to say that I love following you on Instagram and TikTok because what you post, it's about habits. And I think sometimes that's tough to see because everybody knows what they want to do or they need to do. But the way that you spell it out and the way that you show, like even what you do is super powerful. And it's just light and a lot of energy. And I just feel like I get motivated by watching what you're doing and seeing what you're doing on both TikTok and Instagram. So, if anybody would like to follow you, where could they find you?
I am at Monica Tibbs. So MONICATHIBS on both Instagram and TikTok. And I love to try to be funny on social media. I love to try to be super relatable and insert a little bit of tough love because I think people respond to that really well. Just that bluntness. And that's part of my personality. So I love to be me and share my nerdy passion for habits with people. So thank you.
Yeah. And your dog is so cute too.
Oh, he's such an old grumpy man. He also keeps me accountable with my habits because his internal clock is like none other. He is at the door ready for our walk every single morning. So he doesn't let me slack off.
Maybe that's the missing piece.
Yes.
Get a puppy.
I want one.
Say
so
no
bad.
more.
We both want one so bad.
It's happening. Putting it out in the universe. I'm starting to build some habits. It's happening. No, but we will definitely plug your socials in the show notes because you guys, you're going to want to follow her because not only is it fun, but you simplified. And that's what we are all about, Gold Ivy, right? Simplifying health and wellness. It does not need to be this complicated. And a lot of the times when you think about habits, it's kind of mundane. It's not really exciting, but you're proving that it can be and that it is. So I love it. Well, everything you post on social is gold and everything you've shared today has been gold. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today, your wisdom, your gold.
Yes, Monica, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. Is there anything last final thoughts that you have for our listeners?
My biggest takeaway for listeners is that the answer is within your habit. You don't need to find this magical pot of motivation to get to where you want to be. Take a deeper look at your habits, and I promise it will pay off.
Amen.
I love that.
Well, before we jump into our 3 gold stars, please remember that you can use all of Gold Ivy's resources that you feel could benefit your life. Don't forget to hit subscribe to this Ivy Unleashed podcast so you never miss an episode, and find Gold Ivy Health Co. on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all the socials to get exclusive tips. Also, when you join the Ivy League for our weekly blog and newsletter. And if there's one thing you can take away from this, it's just check out our website, goldivyhealthco.com.
Yes. All right. Well, now it's time for our 3 gold stars.
All right, Monica. So these are our 3 gold stars for our listeners. 3 actionable steps that they can walk away from.
Mm-hmm. My first is to get real with yourself about what's distracting you and limit those things in your life.
Love it.
Number 2, learn how to hype yourself the bleep up. You have got to be able to cheer yourself on, especially in these small wins every single day. That is what is going to wire these new habits that feel unnatural and feel uncomfortable to you into your brain so that they become part of your life. And number 3 is to allow yourself to be mindful about what you're getting out of this process. It's about the journey. Make sure that you can pinpoint those feelings within your own body, within your own mind, so that you know where you're moving and when you need to try a different direction.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming aware, being mindful. Love it. All right, next up is our Unleashing Ivy segment. So these are our 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Monica, what's one thing you do that helps determine the habits you want to focus on?
Aligning with that vision that you've created for your best life, where you're going. When you have a really clear picture of what that is, it's really easy to pinpoint what behaviors and what habits are going to get you there.
Yeah. What is that identity?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? All right. Number 2, when you're really struggling with discipline, what's one thing that steers you in a positive direction?
This is where my tough love comes in. I assess if I'm being a wimp or if I'm feeling this resistance because my body or my mind is trying to tell me something different. When we feel resistance, it's oftentimes because that's the thing that's going to set us into growth. It's the thing that's going to take us outside of our comfort zone. And so it's really easy to just say, oh, I don't want to do that because it's scary. And for me personally, I, again, have to tune into my own body. Am I not working out because I'm being a wimp and I want to stay under my weighted blanket? Or is it because I truly need rest and that's going to serve me better than a workout?
Yeah, there's no growth in the comfort zone, and reminding ourselves that if it's hard, it's because it's worth it.
I love that. I'm going to use that. That's powerful. I think too, I love tough love too. I love that, like, am I being a wimp right now? Or like you said, no, I'm exhausted and I actually need sleep. There is a difference for sure. And you know yourself well enough to know if you're being a wimp.
It's all about checking yourself.
Yep.
Totally.
All right. And last question here. What's one thing you wish you would have known sooner?
One thing I wish I would have known sooner is that starting messy or starting when you're not ready is better than not starting at all. I really had to cling to this when I was getting my business up and running. And especially when it comes to habits, you just need to be able to allow yourself to start. So many times we are comparing ourselves to people that have been doing these things for years. And we're starting off with this little baby bird habit that just needs to be nurtured. And we can't play that game. So stop comparing, stay in your lane, and just get moving.
So good. And something I tell myself too when I'm scared and I'm feeling overwhelmed and the comparison game has set in, I say, you will never be ready. There's no such thing as ready. Just take the first step and go.
Yes, I love that. All right. And the last thing we love to do on every episode is leave our listeners with a piece of gold. So this is a quote that speaks to your heart. Would you like to do the honors and leave our listeners with a piece of gold?
Yes. So piece of gold today is from me, and it is shift your focus to the type of person you want to be instead of the things you want to do.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.